The room was full of applause when my wife lifted the microphone. 30 seconds later, nobody was clapping. Nobody was breathing. What she said at my retirement party stopped time cold. Folks, Uncle Mickle here. I've told a lot of stories in my life, but this one still tightens my chest when I say it out loud. I want you to hear it the way it happened to me. No polish, no excuses, just the truth as it landed. Before I get into this, do me a favor and drop a comment telling me where in the world you're watching from and what time it is right now. And if stories like mine hit you where it hurts, go ahead and hit that like button and subscribe. Helps Uncle Mickle keep bringing you the truth nobody else wants to talk about. Now let me take you back to the moment everything cracked. It was a Friday evening in late October, the kind where the air finally cools and people start wearing jackets they haven't pulled out in months. The banquet hall was booked months in advance. Beige walls, soft lighting, round tables dressed up with white cloths, and those little battery candles that flicker like they're trying too hard. Nothing fancy, just respectable. Just enough to say, this man put in his time. 42 years on the job. Same company. Same damn parking spot for the last 15. This night was supposed to be a clean ending. My co-workers were there. Men and women I'd argued with, covered for, trained, and watched retire before me. There was laughter, clinking glasses. Old stories exaggerated the way they always are when time dulls the rough edges. My boss gave a speech. HR gave a plaque. Somebody made a joke about me finally learning how to sleep past 5 a.m. And my wife, Jennifer, sat at my table smiling like she always did. I remember noticing how calm I felt. That surprised me. I'd expected pride, maybe a little sadness, but mostly I felt steady. Like I'd done what I was supposed to do. Like life was finally slowing down enough for me to catch my breath. Jennifer squeezed my hand when my name was called for the last time. Her palm was cold. I didn't think much of it. The room was chilly, and she'd always run cold anyway. Then the host announced, and now, a few words from the woman who's been standing beside him all these years. That got a laugh. A warm one. Jennifer stood up, smoothed her dress, walked to the microphone. I remember thinking she looked tired. Not nervous, tired. Like someone who hadn't slept well in a long time. She smiled at the crowd, waited for the room to settle, and let out a small breath before she spoke. The first part of her speech was exactly what you'd expect. She talked about the long hours, the missed dinners, the weekends I spent on call. She joked about how the company got more of me than she did some years. People nodded. A few chuckled. Someone raised a glass. I was relaxed, proud even. Then her tone shifted. Just a little. Most folks wouldn't have caught it. But when you've been married to someone for over 25 years, you hear changes other people miss. There was a pause where there shouldn't have been one. A swallow. Her fingers tightened around the microphone. She looked straight at me. Not lovingly. Not warmly. Honestly. And that's when she said the sentence that froze the room. The kind of sentence that doesn't echo right away. It just drops. Heavy. Final. Like a truth that's been waiting too long to be spoken. I felt my smile lock in place. I felt the blood drain from my face. And I knew, right there, under those soft lights, that my retirement party wasn't about celebrating an ending anymore. It was about exposing one. And as Jennifer kept talking, I realized this night was never meant to be a gift. It was a reckoning. Before that night, before the microphone and the silence and the truth I wasn't ready to hear, my life looked solid from the outside. Dependable. Boring. Even, the kind of boring people say they want once they've been burned enough times. Jennifer and I had been married 26 years. Met in our early 20s, back when our dreams were loud and our bank accounts were quiet. We built everything the slow way. Starter apartment with thin walls. Used furniture. One car between us that broke down twice a year like it was on a schedule. We laughed more back then. Or maybe we just noticed it more. By the time the story really begins, we lived in a modest 2-story house on a quiet street where nothing ever happened. Same neighbors for years. Same mailman. Same dog barking 3 houses down every morning at exactly 6:30. Predictable in the best way. I worked. Jennifer worked part-time for years, then full-time once the kids were grown. 2 children. Both out of the house. One married. One figuring it out. We'd reached that phase people warn you about, the quiet phase. No more soccer schedules. No more late-night homework arguments. Just two adults sharing space and history. And I thought we were doing okay. Our routines were locked in. Coffee together most mornings. Dinner together most nights. We weren't affectionate the way young couples are, but we were comfortable. Familiar. We knew each other's moods without asking. Knew when to give space. Knew when silence was better than words. Or at least, I thought I did. Looking back now, I can see how much of my confidence came from habit, from assuming that longevity meant loyalty. That shared years were proof enough. I believed that if something were wrong, I'd feel it in my bones. But bones get tired, and tired things miss cracks. Jennifer had always been steady, practical, not dramatic. She didn't yell when she was upset. She withdrew. That was her way. I learned early on that silence from her meant more than any argument. Over the years, I'd gotten good at reading it, or so I believed. In the year leading up to my retirement, life shifted just enough to feel off balance. Not alarming, just different. She started working later hours. Said the office was understaffed. That deadlines were tighter. I didn't question it. Work had always been work. Sometimes it asks more. Sometimes less. She took more interest in her appearance. New clothes. New haircut. A different perfume. I told myself that was normal. People change. Women especially get tired of being invisible. I admired it even. Complimented her. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes the way it used to. We talked less. Not in a dramatic way. Just fewer conversations that wandered. Fewer moments that lingered. Our words stayed functional. Grocery lists. Schedules. Bills. We still said goodnight. Still said love you. But sometimes it sounded like habit, not emotion. And I didn't push. That's something I own now. I didn't push because pushing would mean admitting that something might be wrong. And I wasn't ready for that. I was counting down to retirement, like it was a finish line that would fix everything. More time. Less stress. Space to reconnect. That was the story I told myself. The retirement party was Jennifer's idea. She insisted we invite everyone. Said it mattered. Said it was important to celebrate properly. I remember being touched by how invested she was. Thought it meant she was proud of me. Now I know she needed witnesses. The warning sign came a week before the party. I walked into the kitchen late one night and found her standing there in the dark, phone in her hand, screen glowing against her face. She jumped when she saw me. Actually jumped. She said she couldn't sleep. Said she was just scrolling. I believed her. But when I leaned in to kiss her cheek, she turned her head, just slightly, and said she was tired. That was all. A small moment. An easy excuse. The kind of thing you forget by morning. I didn't know then that it was the last quiet warning I'd ever get. The doubt didn't arrive all at once. It never does. It slips in quietly, like a draft through a window you didn't realize was cracked. After that night in the kitchen, I started noticing things I'd been skimming past for months. Not because I was suspicious, not yet, but because something in me had shifted. Like my instincts had finally sat up and cleared their throat. Jennifer guarded her phone. Not in an obvious way. She didn't snatch it away or hide it under pillows. She just kept it face down. Always face down. And when a message came in, she'd glance at the screen first before opening it, her thumb hovering like she was deciding something important. I told myself I was reading too much into it. Then there were the changes in her schedule. Her work days stretched later and later, but her paycheck didn't reflect it. She said overtime rules were weird now. I didn't understand them, so I let it go. I'd spent decades trusting her. One unanswered question didn't erase that. Still, my gut started whispering. We'd sit on opposite ends of the couch some evenings, television murmuring between us, and I'd feel her somewhere else. Physically present, mentally gone. When I asked how her day was, she answered in summaries. No details. No complaints. Just enough to end the conversation. That wasn't like her. One night, I reached for her hand out of habit. She let me hold it for a moment, then gently pulled away and said she needed to finish an email. The way she said it, apologetic but firm, stuck with me. It felt rehearsed. I didn't confront her. I didn't accuse. I didn't even ask follow-up questions. Instead, I started paying attention. I noticed how she dressed for work differently on certain days. Not better, intentional. Like she knew someone specific would be looking. I noticed how she checked the mirror before leaving. Then again in the car window as she walked past it. I noticed how she hummed sometimes when she got home late, like she was carrying a private memory that hurt more than any argument would have. The inciting moment, the one I can point to now, came 3 days before my retirement party. Jennifer asked me what time I'd be home on Thursday. That wasn't unusual, but when I told her, she paused. Just a beat too long. Then she said she might be running late, and asked if I'd mind ordering takeout for myself. I said of course. No problem. But something in her tone told me this wasn't about food. That evening, she came home close to 10. Later than usual. She smelled different. Not perfume. Something else. Soap maybe. Hotel soap has a way of clinging, even when you think you've washed it off. She went straight to the shower. I stood in the hallway and listened to the water run longer than necessary. That night, I lay awake beside her, staring at the ceiling, counting breaths. Mine. Hers. The distance between us felt wider than the bed. I wanted to roll over and ask her directly. To say, is there something you need to tell me? But fear has a way of convincing you silence is safer. The next day, I did something I'd never done in our entire marriage. I checked our phone bill. I told myself it was practical, that we'd be tightening our budget once I retired, that I just wanted to know what expenses looked like. That was the lie I used to get myself through it. The truth sat there in black and white. A number I didn't recognize. Repeated. Frequent. Long calls. Always during her late work hours. Never on weekends. Never when I was home. I didn't call the number. I didn't confront her. I didn't even screenshot it. I closed the browser and sat at the kitchen table, hands flat on the wood, heart pounding like I'd just run upstairs. I remember thinking, maybe there's an explanation. That's the dangerous part. The mind will build 1,000 bridges to avoid crossing the one that leads to truth. The retirement party was 2 days away. The house buzzed with preparation. Jennifer seemed energized, focused, almost relieved. And I had this growing, gnawing sense that whatever was happening wasn't going to stay hidden much longer. Something was coming. I just didn't know yet that she was the one planning the reveal, and that I wouldn't get to control how I learned the truth. Discovery doesn't always come in a single, dramatic moment. Sometimes it arrives in layers, each one peeling back a little more skin until there's nowhere left to hide from the pain. The morning of my retirement party, I woke up early. Earlier than usual. My body clock didn't know what to do with the idea that this was my last workday. I lay there listening to the house breathe, pipes clicking, floorboards settling, and to Jennifer's steady breathing beside me. She looked peaceful in sleep. That almost broke me. I got up quietly and went to the kitchen, made coffee, sat at the table, stared at nothing. That number from the phone bill kept flashing in my mind like a warning light. I told myself I wouldn't ruin my own day with paranoia, that I'd get through the party, enjoy it, and then, after, we'd talk. Fate doesn't care about your plans. Jennifer came downstairs around 8, already dressed. Too dressed. Makeup done. Hair styled. She said she wanted to look nice for the party. I nodded, complimented her. She thanked me, but her eyes didn't linger on mine. When she reached for her phone on the counter, a notification lit up the screen. A name. Just a first name. David. Not a co-worker I knew. Not a family member. Just David. She saw me see it. For a split second, her face changed. Not panic. Not guilt. Calculation. Then she flipped the phone over and said, "Work stuff." I didn't argue. I didn't smile. I just nodded. Something hardened in my chest. After she left for work, I sat back down at the table and stayed there a long time. Long enough for the coffee to go cold. Long enough for the denial to finally lose its grip. I needed to know. I'm not proud of what I did next, but pride doesn't mean much when your life is tilting. Jennifer had an old tablet she rarely used anymore. Same account. Same backups. She'd never bothered changing the password. Why would she? Trust makes you careless. It took me less than 5 minutes. Messages don't lie. They don't soften their edges. They sit there, time-stamped and undeniable. Weeks, months, plans disguised as complaints about work, jokes that didn't belong to co-workers, late-night messages that said things no one should say outside their marriage. And then the confirmation, the kind that punches the air out of your lungs. A hotel name, a room number. Last night was amazing. I didn't scroll further than that. I couldn't. I stood up so fast the chair tipped over behind me. My hands were shaking. My mouth tasted metallic. I remember gripping the counter just to stay upright. 42 years at one job, 26 years married, and my world collapsed in under 10 minutes. I didn't cry. Not then. Shock has a way of freezing tears. I cleaned up the house in a daze. Showered, dressed, went through the motions like a man watching himself from across the room. Every so often, I catch my reflection in a mirror and barely recognize the person staring back. By the time Jennifer came home to get ready for the party, I was calm. Too calm. That scared me more than anger would have. She moved around me like everything was normal. Like we were still partners. Like she hadn't shattered something sacred. I watched her closely. The way she avoided my eyes. The way she smiled when her phone buzzed, then remembered herself and schooled her expression. She was already living in two worlds. The drive to the banquet hall was quiet. She asked if I was excited. I said yes, and meant it, though not for the reasons she thought. Because now I knew. The discovery wasn't just the affair. It was the realization that she'd planned to say something that night. Something big enough to need an audience. Big enough to take control of the narrative before I ever opened my mouth. That knowledge settled in my gut like a stone. When we arrived, people greeted us warmly. Compliments. Congratulations. Smiles all around. Jennifer played her part perfectly. The supportive wife. The proud partner. And I played mine. But underneath the polite laughter and handshakes, something dark and steady was forming. Not rage. Not despair. Resolve. I didn't know exactly what was coming yet, but I knew one thing for certain as I took my seat and listened to the speeches begin. This wasn't going to end the way she thought it would. There's a strange calm that comes after the worst truth settles in. Once the damage is fully visible, your mind stops racing and starts sorting. That's where I found myself, sitting at that round table, napkin folded just right, hands steady, heart bruised but focused. Jennifer believed she was in control. I could see it in the way she laughed a second too loud at certain jokes. The way she kept checking the room, like she was counting exits. She thought tonight belonged to her. She was wrong. I didn't confront her. Not in the car. Not at the table. Not when she leaned over and whispered that she loved me. That word meant something different now. I let it hang in the air unanswered. Instead, I planned. Planning wasn't about revenge. Not yet. It was about dignity. About not letting my last night, in that chapter of my life, be defined by someone else's betrayal. I'd spent decades earning respect quietly. I wasn't about to lose it loudly. I thought through my options carefully. If I stood up and exposed her first, I'd look bitter, emotional, reactionary. People would remember the outburst, not the truth. If I stayed silent and let her speak, I risked being blindsided in front of everyone I knew. So I decided to listen, to wait, to let her show her hand. There's power in patience, especially when the other person underestimates you. As speeches went on, I replayed the messages I'd seen that morning. Not the words themselves, but the intent behind them, the planning, the deception. This wasn't a mistake. It was a choice, repeated over time. That clarity stripped away any lingering hope that this could be talked away. I felt grief, yes, but it was clean grief. Honest. The kind that clears fog instead of creating it. I also felt something else, relief. Because uncertainty is heavier than truth. And now I knew exactly where I stood. I reminded myself of who I was before this marriage, before this job, before this night. I was a man who kept his word, who faced problems head-on, who didn't beg for loyalty from someone who'd already given it away. I glanced at Jennifer. She was scrolling on her phone under the table, thumb moving quickly. Probably David. Probably last-minute reassurance. The thought didn't make my blood boil like I expected. It made me sad. Not for me. For her. Because no matter what she said that night, no matter how she framed it, she was about to step into a truth she couldn't undo. Public truth changes things. It hardens lines. And she was about to learn that I wasn't the passive, oblivious husband she thought I was. I decided then that I wouldn't interrupt her. I wouldn't argue. I wouldn't plead or protest. I would let her speak. And then, when it was my turn, because there's always a turn, I would say exactly what needed to be said. No more. No less. I rehearsed nothing. I didn't need to. The truth doesn't require rehearsal. It just needs a steady voice. As dessert plates were cleared and the host returned to the microphone, I felt a shift in the room. The night was moving toward its center, toward the moment Jennifer had been waiting for. She squeezed my hand again, harder this time. "Thank you for letting me do this," she whispered. I looked at her, really looked at her, and nodded. You see, the turning point isn't always loud. Sometimes it's a quiet decision made in the middle of noise. A line drawn so cleanly you don't feel it until you step over it. Jennifer stood up when her name was called. The room applauded. Warm. Expectant. I leaned back in my chair, folded my hands, and prepared myself. Not for what she was about to say, but for what I would say after. Because the storm wasn't coming. It was already here. And I was done being afraid of the rain. Jennifer stepped up to the microphone, and the room settled the way it always does when someone familiar is about to speak. Friendly. Supportive. Expectant. People smiled at her like she was part of the celebration. She took a breath. And then she went off script. She started by thanking everyone for coming. Thanking the company. Thanking me for the life we built. Her voice was steady, but there was an edge to it now, sharpened, intentional. Then she said it. She said that marriage changes. She said that people grow apart. She said that sometimes love turns into obligation, and obligation turns into loneliness. You could feel the room shift. Forks stopped clinking. A few people glanced at me, confused. Then she said, "And I don't want to pretend anymore." There it was. She talked about how long she'd felt invisible, how she'd given years of support and sacrifice, how she'd found herself connecting with someone who truly saw her. She didn't use the word affair. She didn't say his name. But everyone knew. She framed it like a confession wrapped in self-discovery. Like bravery. Like this was her truth, finally spoken aloud. And we were all supposed to respect it. Some people looked uncomfortable. Others sympathetic. A few avoided looking at me altogether. Jennifer finished by saying she hoped we could all understand that sometimes endings are necessary for new beginnings. Then she looked at me and handed me the microphone. That moment, that walk from my chair to the front of that room, felt longer than any shift I'd ever worked. My legs were steady. My hands didn't shake. The quiet followed me like a held breath. I didn't rush. I turned to face the room. Faces I'd known for decades. People who respected me. People who thought they knew my life. I cleared my throat once. And I spoke. I said, "Thank you all for coming tonight. It really does mean a lot." Polite. Calm. Then I said, "I want to thank Jennifer, too, for finally being honest." Her eyes flickered. Just once. I continued. "I found out this morning that my wife has been having an affair for several months. With a man named David. They've been meeting during her late work nights. Including last Thursday. At the Hampton on Route 9. You could hear it then. Gasps. Chairs shifting. Someone whispered, "Oh my God." Jennifer's face drained of color. She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. I didn't raise my voice. "I didn't plan to share this tonight," I said. "But since honesty seems to be the theme, I figured it was only fair that the whole truth got told." I paused. Let it land. "I also want to be clear about something," I went on. "I didn't fail this marriage in secret. I showed up. I worked hard. I was faithful. If Jennifer felt lonely, she had every opportunity to talk to me before she chose someone else." Silence. Heavy. Complete. I handed the microphone back to the host, nodded once, and returned to my seat. That was it. No shouting. No insults. No drama. Jennifer stood there frozen, exposed by her own stage. The narrative she'd tried to control collapsed under the weight of facts. The host stumbled through an attempt to close the evening. People avoided eye contact. Some came over quietly to shake my hand. Others hugged me. Jennifer left early. Alone. I stayed. Because I had nothing to hide. That night ended my career the way I'd earned it, with integrity intact. And it ended my marriage the way it deserved, in truth, under bright lights, where lies can't survive. The applause never came back. But something better did. Clarity. The days after the party moved slowly, like time had thickened. No more schedules. No more early alarms. Retirement had arrived exactly as planned, just not under the circumstances I imagined. Jennifer didn't come home that night. She texted once, said she needed space. I didn't respond. There was nothing left to clarify. Space had already been taken. The house felt different without her. Not empty, honest. Every room held echoes of a life that had already ended before either of us admitted it. I walked through those rooms deliberately, like I was saying goodbye, without ceremony. We spoke a few days later, calmly, logistically, dividing things that had once been shared with love. Furniture, accounts, years. She cried. I didn't. Not because I didn't feel it, but because my tears had already been spent in silence. She apologized, said she hadn't meant to hurt me, said she didn't expect me to expose her like that. I told her I hadn't exposed her. I told the truth. There's a difference. The divorce was quiet. No courtroom drama. No revenge. Just signatures and finality. David didn't last long. They rarely do. Affairs survive on secrecy. Once daylight hits, they tend to crumble. What surprised me most was how quickly peace followed. Not happiness, peace. The absence of constant second-guessing. The relief of not wondering anymore. I reconnected with old friends. Took walks in the mornings, just because I could. Learned how to sit with my thoughts without trying to drown them out with noise. Some days were heavier than others. Healing isn't linear. But every day, the weight shifted a little. I learned something important in that season. Betrayal doesn't destroy you. Confusion does. Once the truth is known, even when it hurts, you can build around it. You can stand on it. You can move forward. People ask me sometimes if I regret how that night went down. I don't. Because dignity isn't about staying quiet to keep others comfortable. It's about standing firm when your truth is tested. I lost a marriage. I lost the future I thought I'd have. But I kept myself. And that turned out to be enough. The house is quieter now. But when I wake up, I breathe easier. There's no knot on my chest. No unasked questions hanging in the air. Just morning light. And the rest of my life ahead of me. And that's something no one can take away. So that's my story, folks. Not a fairy tale. Not a victory lap. Just a man standing in the aftermath of a life he thought was solid, learning how to walk again on new ground. If there's one thing I want you to take from this, it's this. Trust your instincts, but don't let fear silence you. Love should never require you to shrink yourself or ignore what your gut is trying to tell you. And honesty, even when it comes late, is always better than a comfortable lie. I don't hate Jennifer. Hate takes energy I'd rather spend living. What I feel now is acceptance. And acceptance has a strange way of clearing space for better things. Life doesn't end when someone betrays you. It changes. And sometimes, change is the door you were too loyal or too afraid to open yourself. So that's my story, folks. If it resonated with you, go ahead and hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments where you're listening from. I want to know how far Uncle Mickle's voice travels. And remember this, truth hurts, but living without it hurts longer.